guys, my name is Em and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video it is going to be my December TBR, my festive TBR, or basically just the books that I want to read before the end of the year. This TBR is exceptionally ambitious. There are a lot of books on this TBR, probably more books than I've read in the past 6 months combined, so I don't really know why I think that I'm going to be able to read all of them in arguably the busiest month of the year. Also, this is not going to be my Christmas books TBR. I am going to be doing a separate video of lots of like Christmas rom-com recommendations. I think that should be the next sit down video that you see, and basically that's going to be like 50 or 60 like Christmas rom-com recs, but I did not put them all on this TBR because I know that I'm not going to make it through 60 books in a month, especially Christmas rom-coms. So this is just like my general TBR. I will be probably reading a couple of Christmassy rom-coms in between, but that's a separate video. So yeah, without further ado, let's just get straight into the TBR. Okay, so first up on this TBR we have Forever Never by Lucy Score. Even the cover alone of this book just gives Christmassy vibes. Like literally, like that is just snowy trees. That is a Christmassy book if ever I've seen one. This is a romance book set on like this small island, so it is like a small town romance, but with an added bonus that the town is actually an island. And I'm just going to read you the tagline of this book. It is, "You don't fall for your brother's high school sweetheart, your boss's daughter, or your ex-wife's best friend, especially when they're all the same woman." I feel like that says enough. But yeah, this book just looks so fun. It is quite a thick book, but I feel like it should be easy enough to get through, and I might download it on my Kindle as well because I do think it's on KU. So very excited for this one. Then we have two books that I do own physically, but I don't currently have the physical copies of them, and that is Legendary and Finale by Stephanie Garber, which is book 2 and 3 in the Caraval series. I read Caraval back in 2020 and I remember loving it, but never wanted to continue with the series because in my opinion I feel like Caraval actually kind of could have been a standalone. Like I didn't really care enough to continue the series. But then I read the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. It is one of my favorite series of all times, and it's made me really want to finish the Caraval series. And also I feel like because they are so whimsical and magical and cozy, they just give such Christmassy winter vibes, and I feel like it is the perfect time to read them when you're like snuggled by the fire with a hot chocolate, watching a Christmas movie and reading one of these books. Like that's just so magical. Okay, and then I know I said that there were no Christmassy rom-coms on this TBR. However, I do currently own 3 physical Christmas books and I am going to put them on this TBR. So the first one is Lovelight Farms by B.K. Barrison. I've seen so much hype for this book. I've seen so many great reviews of this book, and it actually took me quite a while to realize that this was actually a Christmas book. I know that like the mistletoe on the front cover should have kind of told me that it was a Christmassy book, but it somehow didn't. But yeah, I'm very excited to read this one. This is again a small town romance where I think one of them owns a Christmas tree farm. The tagline of this book is, "A handsome freckled data analyst, a messy optimistic Christmas tree farm owner, a small town with the best hazelnut lattes on the East Coast." That says enough. Can't wait to read it. Then the next one, which I feel like could be pretty hit or miss, is Window Shopping by Tessa Bailey. I've had this book physically for a few years. I've always put off reading it because I'm kind of scared that it's not going to be good, and I feel like with Christmas rom-coms you hit a point where you physically can't read another one. It's literally like 240 something pages, which is so short. Like you could easily get through this in a day, but I keep putting it off. So maybe this year will be the one that I finally do read it. Like it sounds good, you know, it looks good, the cover's good. Hopefully I will get to it. And then the final Christmas book that I have on this TBR is A Merry Little Meet Cute by Julie Murphy and Sierra Simone. I got this one last year and I feel like I thought this was going to be like such a wholesome Christmassy rom-com, but it actually in fact isn't. I feel like it is exceptionally spicy, which is not what I was expecting when I bought the book. I've also not heard like the best reviews about this, so again fairly hit or miss. Not sure if I want to read it or not, but also like I do want to do like a 24-hour readathon where I read festive books, and I feel like this could be a really fun one to read in that because I feel like it would be quite a fast read. Then next up on this TBR we have Final Offer by Lauren Asher. I really want to finish this series. This is the 3rd and final book in the Dreamland Billionaire series. I feel like I'm gonna love this one. I read the fine print in 2022, I think. Didn't really love it, like kind of liked it but didn't love it. I feel like Rowan and Zara just were not for me. Then I read Terms and Conditions earlier this year, I believe, Really liked that one. I think that was really, really good, really well done. Loved the tropes, loved Iris and Declan. So yeah, that was like a 4-star I think. And then I feel like this one could be my favorite out of the 3 because I already really like this brother. So yeah, I definitely do want to finish out this series. And then another reason that I want to finish this one is because I want to read Love Redesigned, which is the next book on this TBR. This is Lauren Asher's newest release and it is the start of a new series. I know that technically I probably don't have to finish this series to read this one, but I kind of want to, just because I feel like there will be probably like a cameo in this one because I do think they are set in like the same world, and I feel like because I've already read 2 out of 3 of these books, I might as well just finish this series before starting this one. But I'm literally equally excited for both of these books. I feel like they're going to be amazing. I really like Lauren Asher's writing, I really like her books, and I just can't wait to read both of these. Then the next book that I have on this TBR is Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. Basically, I bought this book when the hype was going on for it last Christmas. There was so much hype for this book at the time, and it still has amazing reviews, it still has a lot of hype. But then I kind of like got discouraged from reading this book and I just kept putting it off, and then I was like, well, it's not winter anymore, I can't read it. So I kind of like thought that I would never read this book, to be honest with you. But then I read Wildfire by Hannah Grace, which is actually the second book in this series, and I loved it so much. It was a 5 out of 5 star read and it made me want to read this book so badly. And also I feel like because this is like an ice skating romance, that just screams winter, that screams Christmas, and I'm really, really, really excited to read this one. Next up, this one is a very ambitious one, but one that I definitely am very excited for, and that book is Saving Six by Chloe Walsh. This is the 3rd book in the Boys of Tommen series, but like it's like the first book from Joey and Aoife's POV, because like the series is like, it's the same series but like it's from different character POVs and a different couple basically. But I just really want to read this one. I read Binding and Keeping 13 earlier this year and I still regularly think about those books. Johnny Kavanagh and Shannon Lynch are just consistently in my mind and I just think of those books all the time, and I literally get emotional sometimes when I think of them because of how much I loved them, and I've never read romance books like them before. And I feel like half of the reason that I've not continued with like Joey and Aoife's books are because I literally do not want this series to be over, because I can only read these for the first time once, if you know what I mean. And then next up on the TBR we have Magnolia Parks, The Long Way Home. Again, I don't know why, but this book gives me major Christmas vibes. There's nothing remotely Christmassy about this book, but it just gives me those vibes. This is the 3rd book in the Magnolia Parks universe and I am so excited to read this. I have no idea what's going to happen in this book because the first one ended on a major cliffhanger, let me tell you. So yeah, I'm just very, very excited to read this one. It feels like you're reading a reality TV show and it's just so fun. Then next up we have 3 fantasy books, and the first one is Foul Lady Fortune by Chloe Gong. I need to catch up on Chloe Gong's releases because she has since released a novella, the sequel to this one, and also the first book in a new series. So I really need to catch up with her books. I read These Violent Delights and Our Violent Ends around this time last year, so that's why they just give me that Christmassy winter vibe, because I remember distinctly reading These Violent Delights around Christmas Day last year. But this one is basically like a spin-off series to These Violent Delights but with the same characters but a different main character, if that makes sense, and I'm very excited to read this one. Then next up we have One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I have recently seen so many people talking about this book, so many people reading this book, and so many people reading the sequel as well. Basically I did intend on reading this during spooky season because even though it is a fantasy, it does kind of have those like darker spooky topics. I think even like based on like the end pages, like that is absolutely terrifying, so I feel like it would have been a really good spooky season read. But fantasy books and even darker fantasy books are still very wintry and very Christmassy, so I cannot wait to read this one as well. Then next up we have The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. I bet you know what I'm gonna say, but this gives me Christmassy vibes just simply because it's a fantasy book, but it is like a cozy kind of fantasy book. Maybe that's not even correct, I actually don't think it is, but it just gives me those vibes basically. And if you have learned anything about me, it's that I read for the vibes. But yeah, this one I actually started like a good while ago and I read to chapter 8. I just wasn't in a fantasy reading mood, so I stopped reading it, but I was really loving what I was reading. And this one just kind of has that typical like YA fantasy plot where there's like a rebellion and then enemies to lovers, and I love it. Like I've probably read the same trope like 50 times in different fonts, but like I will fall for it every single time and love it every single time, and I just cannot wait to read this book. And also the fact that like this series is completed now, I'm fairly sure anyways, is definitely making me want to read it a bit more, because I always start series that have not been finished and then I get a cliffhanger at the end and I have to wait like a year before the next one's out. So I feel like this would be a fun one to read this month. It does give me those wintry Christmas vibes. It's a really easy to read fantasy from what I remember, and then also it would give me another fantasy series to read in 2024. So they are all of the books that I have physically on my December TBR, but I do also have a couple of books on this TBR that I really want to read this month that I don't have physically yet. So the first one is Broken Vow by Sophie Lark, which is book 5 in the Brutal Birthright series. I'm currently reading book 4 and I think I will probably finish it before the end of the month. So I do actually want to read book 5 in December so that I can potentially finish out that series. Is there a 6th one? Actually, I'm not sure if there's a 6th one, but I want to finish that series very soon because I know there's like so many spin-off series based off of this series. I just love them so much. They're mafia romance books, they're on Kindle Unlimited, and they're the perfect like palette cleanser book that you can just fly through, and like they don't require a lot of like thinking or anything like that. Like they're just fun vibes. Love them. Can't wait to finish the series. Then the next one is The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. I literally only added this one to my TBR list earlier this morning because my best friend Lucy from Library of Lucy is currently reading it, and she was telling us like, you have to read it, like it's so good, and I trust her judgment, I trust her book recs, but that one is definitely on my TBR for this month. We are down to the final 3 books on this TBR, and they are all books that have not been released yet. So the first one is Caught Up by Liz Tomford. This one actually has been released, I think, but the paperback has not been released until next week. This book is the 3rd book in the Windy City series. I actually again didn't read the first book, but I did read the second book, and now I'm going to read the 3rd book, and once I finish the 3rd book I'll probably go back and read the first book. This is a sports romance. It's also like a nanny romance, I think, and I just love the way that Liz Tomford writes her books. When I read The Right Move, like I literally had butterflies as I was reading it because of Ryan Shea, and that rarely happens with men. I think she writes the most amazing male main characters that just are like goals, and like when you read those books you want a boyfriend, but like you want the boyfriend that she's just written, because you know that no one in real life will ever live up to those standards, and I just can't wait to read this book. Then the next one is Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldry, which is the sequel to Legends and Lattes. I actually don't really know who this book follows or like what the premise of this book is. All I know is that it is the sequel to Legends and Lattes, and I read that one in September and just absolutely loved it. It was so cozy. It was literally the coziest fantasy that I think I've ever read. The way it's described is high fantasy, low stakes, and I would 100% agree with that. Like there's stuff going on, but like everything's fine because they're just making their coffees as these things happen, and it is so cozy. It is such good vibes, and I cannot wait to read the sequel. And then the final book on my December festive TBR is Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the sequel to Divine Rivals, which I read a couple of months ago, and I just love the book so much. Like I think it's actually one of my favorite fantasy books that I've ever read. Every time I think of it I smile. I gave it 5 stars. I cannot wait to read the sequel. This one comes out the day after Christmas Day, which is so slay, but also kind of frustrating because there's not going to be any post those days after Christmas, so I don't know when I'm actually going to be able to get my copy of the book, but whenever it arrives I will be reading it in probably one sitting, and more than likely giving it 5 stars as well. But yeah, I'm just so excited for that book. I cannot wait. So yeah, that is the final book on my December TBR. So yeah, that is it for this December TBR. As I said, it is very ambitious. I do not think that I will be able to read all of these books, and I also want to read some Christmassy rom-coms as well, so we're gonna see. Welcome to Bookmas. I hope you're very excited. But yeah, that is it for this video, guys. Let me know down in the comments if you have read any of these books, if you want to read any of these books, or just let me know what's on your December TBR. I always love chatting in the comments. If you watch to the end, comment the Santa Claus emoji. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys. Stay amazing, stay kind, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!